Hi there, my name's Annie Holland. I'm with the Star Library Education Network and the SEAL Solar Eclipse Activities for Libraries program, and I am here today to show you how to set up your Coronado Personal Solar Telescope that is in Kit A for the State Library Kits. All right, so once you've got your stand set up, which is very easy, just like any other tripod, the next step is to get your telescope mounted to that tripod. So you'll notice there are 2 screw holes in the bottom of the telescope. You can attach either of these to the screw wheel right here at the top. And just like any other screw, we want to go righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. So we go ahead and position it on here and start turning this wheel. You'll notice after a few turns, it is very, very sturdy. So next, obviously, we're going to want to point our telescope towards the sun. Now, what happens if the sun is back there and you've set your telescope pointed up this way? Well, crud, I can't do it. Do you need to take off your telescope and try again? Haha, no. You just turn it around. You laugh. But this is the most important part of the video because everyone will try to unscrew it and put it back the other way if I don't say it. So now that we've got the telescope mounted and pointed the right way, you might notice from the shadow it's not really the right way because I'm just getting it set up for you so I don't have to stare at the sun. But now that we've got it set up and pointing the right way, it is now the appropriate time to take off the lens cap at the front. The purpose of this is to just keep dust off this front area. You can also take out the dust cover that is here where the eyepiece goes, and then you can go ahead and insert your eyepiece. So I'm gonna grab my eyepiece real quick. So if you know anything about telescopes or have telescopes in your library, you'll know that the higher number on that eyepiece means the less magnification it has. So this is an 18mm eyepiece. So it's pretty magnified, but not so much that you don't have very good control over the image. I recommend that you use the eyepiece that comes with this. If this eyepiece is to get broken, I recommend that you replace it with something in the 20 to 30 range and make sure that you're getting the correct width diameter for that eyepiece. All right, now that we've got the telescope and its tripod set up, cap off, eyepiece is in, you can do that part in any order. We want to put the fine control knobs onto the telescope. What these fine control knobs do is, just like they sound, let us finely control the way we're moving the telescope. As you know, right, we're rotating around the sun, and as we're rotating around the sun, that means the sun is moving through the sky. The sun is not rising in the east and setting in the west. We're rotating, making it look like it's doing that as we rotate around it. So that means you're gonna see the sun move. When the sun moves, you might be tempted to just grab the telescope and move it whichever way you want to. You could totally do that if you're comfortable doing that. The telescope is meant to work that way. But the alternative, if you want to move in small little increments, just like the sun is doing if you've got a line of people watching, is to use these fine adjustment knobs. So we have one for altitude, which is this direction, and one for azimuth, which is the direction that my telescope's a little stuck right now. That is the east to west sort of direction. I'll put these in and you'll be able to see. So when you're attaching these, it's best to have like a penny or a dime handy to screw, and I'll give you a close-up of this in a second, to screw the screws in. If you use a screwdriver, sometimes that's too tight. If you do it just with your hands, sometimes that's not enough. So now you can see, if you watch really carefully, I've got the up and down, that's the altitude. All right, and then we're gonna want to move over here to do the azimuth, which I'll show you how that turns in just a moment once I get this screw in. So I've got that finger tight, and now you can see the telescope moving in this, I'm not as strong as a telescope, as the knob, moving in this circular direction, right? So again, if you've got a long line of folks, you're gonna want to use these two knobs. Apologies, this one fell off because I lost the second screw. You're gonna want to use these knobs. If you are just doing this, you know, interspersed throughout the day, the knobs are gonna take you forever to turn. So do obviously go ahead and do this. Just turn the whole telescope. That is totally fine, and there is nothing wrong with doing it that way. All right, I want to provide one additional piece of troubleshooting advice when you are using these fine control knobs. If you take a look right in here, you'll see that there's a big screw, and that big screw is what you're turning. So if you get turned all the way, let's watch me do it. If you get turned all the way to one of the ends, eventually, as you can see, you're gonna butt up against the end of that screw. Now, you're gonna remember, because I told you in this video, right? But sometimes people get bumped up against the end of the screw and think that they have broken their fine adjust knob because, and we're almost there, because it won't turn anymore. So if that happens, you just remember that you have to unscrew it all the way. Moving the telescope won't help you at this point. You have to physically unscrew the knob. You probably want to get at least halfway. That way you have the capability to move in either direction. But that is one thing to look out for, is this knob hitting the end on either side, and knowing that you just have to back it out. Now on this side, on the azimuth side, unfortunately, that screw is hidden by this box. You could see it if you get up under the telescope, but it's not the most comfortable thing to do. So you'll just have to trust yourself if you get to the end on this one to stop and back it back up. Hopefully it happens first on this one so that you see it and remember that that's what's going on. All right, so when you actually start viewing the sun, you're going to want to be aware that the further down on the horizon the sun is, the harder it's going to be to set up your telescope. Now, why is that? The trick to setting up the telescope is to see how small you can get that telescope shadow. So you see, if I start adjusting this piece here, that's the piece I'm trying to get smaller to know I'm pointing the right way, right? If it's pointing directly at the sun, then the shadow is going to be its smallest. When we're at the very end of the day or the very beginning of the day, you can't really see that. So around noon, 1 o'clock, much easier time if you're not confident or comfortable setting up this telescope. But do not worry if, just like today, you're observing in the late afternoon and you can't see how straight that shadow, how small that shadow is. There's two other tricks we've got up our sleeves. So number one, you want to stand right in front of your telescope and look straight back with the sun behind you. So you see, I've got my shadow right in front of the sun and the telescope shadow is lined up with me. That means that you're at least in the right direction of the sun, right? You don't need to worry about left and right. You just need to worry about up and down. So let me go ahead and break it for a minute. So now there's my straight shadow because the sun is right behind me, but the telescope is obviously not pointing at me anymore. So we're gonna move that back, get my straight sun shadow and the straight telescope pointing at me. Perfect, we are all lined up. And then the next trick you want to use is to look in this little circle right here. This little circle right here actually is showing you if you're pointed at the sun or not. So we accidentally did really good. We got it on the first try. But let's say we move the telescope down here. So we're looking, oh no, no sun. But we know that we've got it right, left to right. We just need to work on up and down. So I am just grabbing the telescope and moving it up and down a little bit until we see if that sun comes right back into view. So to summarize, to get your telescope set up, you set up this tripod, you screw in this piece, you can then either remove the covers for the lens and for the eyepiece, or add the two fine adjust knobs. In any direction is fine. Then you're gonna wanna check your shadow, check the small finder, get yourself lined up, and take a look. Now, one other thing that might happen to make this less than a perfect experience for you is if you are moving this telescope from an air-conditioned room out to Alabama in the middle of the summer, it is going to fog up and you're not going to be able to see all of the amazing things that we've promised you. So make sure you get your telescope into the environment that you're going to be viewing in at least an hour, preferably 2 or 3 hours, prior to that event starting. This will make sure that not only can you see the full disk of the sun, yes, it is perfectly round, you can also see sunspots, you can see solar prominences, and you can see all of these great things we've promised. The other trick, if you've got really good eyes, is sometimes you might see something in the telescope out of the corner of your eye, and then you'll try to move your eye to look and it'll disappear. Your eyes are not playing tricks on you. Your eyes have cones and rods. The ones on the outside are better for dim objects. The ones on the inside straight ahead are better for bright objects. So you're catching a dim object out of the corner of your eye, and then when you try to focus on it, it disappears. So while you're looking through the telescope, if you haven't seen a sunspot yet or you haven't seen a prominence yet, go ahead and start kind of giving the telescope and the sun the side eye, right? See if anything pops out, especially when you're looking on the limb of the sun, so the outside parts, to try to find those prominences. That's really, really going to help you. Another trick is it gets really bright when you're staring at the sun, right? Bring a blanket for your patrons and throw the blanket over them while they're viewing. Just make sure that the end of the telescope is covered up, and that will also help their eyes adjust a little bit better to what it is they're looking at. Hope you enjoyed this video, and again, if you have any questions, do feel free to reach out to us, and happy viewing.